Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Neftali Danier, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations. It is so good to have all of you here with us this evening as we kick off the Baruch Alumni NDC Speaker Series. And just some housekeeping rules before I begin. If you have any questions during the program, please do type it into the chat, and we will address your questions during the Q&A session of the program. And so that I could continue, I would like to introduce to you one of our alumni leaders in the DC area, Clara Williams, also known as Becky. She is a class of 1982, and she will come right now to welcome all of you and tell you what this evening holds. Becky?
Thank you, Nefti. Okay, thank you all for attending tonight. I'm the current president of the DC chapter for the Baruch alumni. I also thank all the attendees, and also on the line, we have current board members, Abe Akresh, who's having dinner. You're gonna play some pizza right now. And Yvette LaGantry. I hope I did that right a little better. And these are current board members that are on the line. And I'm just so thankful that they're here, and as well you. And this is the first in our DC speaker series. Tonight we have Carlos dos Santos is going to present tonight. And we also have two more lined up, Sean Perryman. We'll hear more about him, but it'll be something good from him as well. I didn't have his bio here, but Yvette may chime in a little bit more about his background. He'll be, I'll let Yvette talk about that because she'll be up next. So we'll have him, and then Yvette will be sharing as well. So we have a series lined up. Hopefully we'll tickle your brain a little bit while we're home, and you'll enjoy. So the next voice you'll hear is Yvette.
Hi, again, this is Yvette LaGantry. I'm so glad everyone could join us today as we kick off this Baruch and DC speaker series. As you know, we try to get together in person to just kind of fellowship with each other and reminisce on experiences in New York. But so we thought we could get together this way, just like we're doing in so many other ways on Zoom, and have a chance to recognize some of our distinguished alumni in this DC area. So just as we go through the presentation, you'll hear a presentation for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll go into questions and answers. So during the talk, you can enter your questions or comments in the chat, and when we get to that section, we'll be reading those off. And as Becky mentioned, that we'll have our presentation tonight, and I'll introduce our speaker in just a moment, but she mentioned that April 22nd, we will have another speaker, and that will be Sean Perryman, who is currently a candidate for Lieutenant Governor in Virginia and is a Baruch alumni. And I see we have John Stoddard there showing a flag, and I bet that is a flag from Mozambique.
That is correct. That is correct.
So also after the Q&A, then we'll try to have some fellowship. We'll go into the small group as we did during our December gathering, so that we can have a chance to chat with each other in smaller groups and talk about perhaps some of the things that we hope to see the alumni chapter engage in. So you can start thinking about it also if you have ideas for other speakers among our alumni. So without further ado, let me please introduce to you Ambassador Carlos dos Santos, and he is the ambassador from Mozambique to the United States. And he has a really lengthy experience in diplomacy, representing Mozambique in bilateral and multilateral affairs and in his government. And he will tell you a bit more about that. I won't give you the details, because he will do that. But I will tell you a little bit about him. Of course, he is a graduate of Baruch from the Executive Masters in Business Administration program, 1999. He also has a master's degree in international relations from the University of Zimbabwe. And he speaks several languages: Portuguese, English, Spanish, and Ronga. And he's here living in DC with his family, representing the country of Mozambique as its ambassador. So thank you so much, Ambassador. I will turn this over to you at this moment.
Thank you very much, Yvette. Thank you for the introduction, for the very kind introduction. I would like to, before I speak, I would like to show you a little bit about Mozambique, and then I'll turn to the notes I've prepared for tonight. I want to definitely have a good conversation with all of you. I will share screen, and please indulge me.
Moçambique é um país atrativo, é um país vibrante, é um país acolhedor, onde todos se sentem bem.
Get ready for an unforgettable journey. This is the unspoiled natural beauty of Mozambique, where sandy beaches complement the crystal blue Indian Ocean, where mountains, rivers and wildlife are the backdrop for unforgettable journeys. Join us as we discover what this up-and-coming destination has to offer. This is Mozambique.
Well, that was a taste of Mozambique. Of course, a lot more you can see if you visit. I wanted to start by thanking Baruch for allowing me to do this and to welcome you all to this talk. I'm very pleased and honored to be here. Just to explain that John Stoddard has the flag of Mozambique because we were colleagues in the same cohort. and we became very good friends, and he did visit Mozambique. So I wanted to acknowledge John. Um, well, as Yvette has said, I'm a very proud alumnus of the class of 1999, the year when Baruch College became Zicklin School of Business, because Mr. Zicklin spoke to us that in our graduation. I was asked to speak a little bit about my background in terms of how I joined diplomacy, and then speak a little bit about the work that I do and I have done. The story of how I became a diplomat.
Excuse me, Carlos, you're muted.
Am I okay now?
Yes, and will you please put your volume up a little bit, please?
My volume.
Yes.
Okay. So I was saying that the story of how I became a diplomat is linked to the history of independence of Mozambique. As you may know, Mozambique didn't have a foreign ministry or foreign policy because it was all run from Lisbon, the Portuguese colonial master. And we became independent only in 1975, after 10 years of liberation struggle. And it was then that a Ministry of Foreign Affairs was established to run the foreign policy of independent Mozambique. At that time of independence, we didn't have any diplomats. So the country had to build up its foreign policy. And I was lucky to be one of the initial groups of diplomats that were brought directly from graduation from high school to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And over a period of 6 years, we had academic studies and practical work in the ministry and at diplomatic and consular missions abroad. After the first year of academic training, I worked for 2 years in the protocol department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and went back to the second academic year. And following that, I was posted to New York only for 1 year. That was the first time I was in New York as an attaché. And then I had to go back to do the third year, which was the final year. Only then did I become a third secretary, which is the first rank for a diplomat in Mozambique. And following that, I was posted to Zimbabwe as a junior diplomat. And I took the advantage of being in Zimbabwe to do further university studies, which were in politics and administration, and then a master's in international relations, as it was indicated by Yvette. I mentioned this story because it was a unique way of starting a diplomatic career. This is not the same today. Today, diplomats in Mozambique come from universities, like here in the United States. They write entrance exams and then they are admitted. But this dual training that we had, which was academic combined with working, was very important to build up the edifice of foreign policy of Mozambique. And I'm very proud to be a part of that group. And the school where I learned diplomacy was later developed into the Higher Institute for International Relations. And today it is a fully fledged university that teaches international relations and diplomacy and teaches public administration as well. Now, the major highlights of my career within Mozambique would be the moment I became private secretary to the President of the Republic and a senior advisor later on to the same president. This was a highlight because of the tremendous experience there beyond the diplomatic area, the foreign policy area that I knew more about. It was also about the politics of the country, working and assisting the president in this. And of course, the heavy responsibility of serving a president, knowing that a mistake that I could make could become, if not immediately detected by the president, could become a mistake for the nation. It was a huge, huge learning curve. I think I did a great job because the president then sent me to New York to serve as ambassador and permanent representative of Mozambique to the United Nations. At the time, I was only 34, and I was one of the youngest ambassadors at the UN, but I remember seeing other younger ambassadors at that time, and it was a huge moment. And this brings me to my second highlight in my career, which was serving at the United Nations, because it is where the foreign policy of every country is promoted and tested on a daily basis. And we deal with such diverse issues as international peace and security, economic and social development, disarmament issues, including nuclear and chemical weapons, conventional arms and landmines, international law, human rights, environment, among others. The training I was given and the experience I acquired in the previous 16 years before I went to New York came in very handy, and the experience I was talking about. I was able to play a significant role on two very important issues for Mozambique. One was combating illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. I became a chairman of the PrepCom of the UN conference that dealt with this issue. And then the second was the implementation process of the Ottawa Convention to ban landmines. I became the Secretary General of the first meeting of state parties of this convention, and the meeting was prepared in New York and Geneva, and then was held in Maputo, Mozambique. As a Catholic, I can say without a doubt that another highlight of my career was to become the first Mozambican ambassador to the Holy See, the Vatican, while serving concurrently as ambassador to Germany. I was privileged to present my credentials to the Pope, Pope Benedict XVI, and to attend many events at the Vatican, interacting with cardinals, bishops, priests, and nuns working at the Vaticans, and those from Mozambique or studying in Italy to become priests. Of course, meeting and presenting credentials to Her Majesty, the Queen of the United Kingdom, meeting the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, and presenting credentials to President Barack Obama were also huge, huge highlights of my career, which have humbled me and remain a great honor and a privilege Now, enough about bragging rights. I wanted to speak a little bit about the job. Mozambique is a developing country which, like most developing nations, faces immense developmental challenges. At independence, literacy was very low and levels of poverty reached levels above 80% of the population, which grew from 10 million at independence to about 30 million people within Mozambique today. The country has made tremendous progress since independence in areas such as education, the healthcare sector, through good political, economic, and corporate governance, and resulted in reducing the levels of poverty from that high level of 80% to 54%, which still remains high, but it is historically remarkable for a country to achieve this reduction of levels of poverty. This means that in foreign policy of Mozambique, besides the universal ideals of promoting cooperation and expanding the universe of partnerships around the world, we have focused attention on development cooperation, economic diplomacy related to attracting the interest of business towards Mozambique, promoting cultural diplomacy, developing academic and research partnerships, as well as sister city and with regions and states relationships, which means we try and branch out from Washington, D.C. or beyond Washington, D.C. We also place strong emphasis on providing consular assistance to the Mozambican community living here in the United States. It's not a big community, but it's sizable, and we work with them regularly, and we provide assistance, and we try to involve them in the development of the country, and they too take interest in that development. We also work on a multilateral level with the groupings that we belong to. The SADC group, Southern African Development Community Group of Ambassadors. We meet regularly once a month, and I'm currently chairing that group of ambassadors by virtue of the chairmanship of Mozambique of this group from August last year until August this year. It's an annual rotation. And we also meet as the African group of the whole once a month to coordinate action and work on joint issues. Another multilateral area covers the World Bank and the IMF. They meet regularly. We, of course, have ministers of finance, governors of central banks coming to meetings here, and we meet, we go there and work with them. But when they go back, we continue the engagement with these institutions, and we work with them on issues of interest for Mozambique. Our main interlocutors here with the government of the United States, the State Department, of course, is the first point of contact, but we also engage with the White House, with the Department of Commerce, Agriculture, the US Trade Representative, USAID, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the Development Finance Corporation, among others. And on the MCC, I'm happy to say that we are now discussing a second compact for Mozambique. The first compact ended in 2013, and it took a while, but we qualified again, and now we may receive another $500 billion for infrastructure projects, for development projects in agriculture, in transport and communications. So we are happy there. And also with the development finance corporations, we have managed to mobilize financing for oil and gas projects within Mozambique. It is also part of our regular work to engage with senators, congressmen and women or regularly on issues of interest to the continent of Africa or to the country, to the specific country, in this case, Mozambique. One issue on which we have been working with Congress about and remains very important for us is the Growth and Opportunity Act, which seeks to promote trade between Mozambique, Africa, and the United States. And it has been working well thus far. We also work with them on political and development issues of common interest. We, of course, engage with the business community directly or through organizations like the Corporate Council on Africa, the US Chamber of Commerce, the Business Council for International Understanding based in New York, and we meet at federal level, at state level, even at most local level in municipalities, cities around the United States. We also follow and participate, we engage with the think tanks that are based here in Washington, DC, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the Brookings Institutions, the Atlantic Council, the Wilson Center, to name only a few, because they discuss issues of great interest to us, international issues, African issues, and sometimes very specific issues related to the country. And they invite us to speak, they invite us to listen, they invite us to debate, and sometimes they produce reports on developments in the African continent. I can also say that the relations between the United States and Mozambique are excellent, both at political level and at diplomatic level. Also, in terms of development cooperation, the United States is the single largest bilateral donor for development cooperation to Mozambique. And this means around $400 million a year. And the area of great focus is the health sector, which has been run with the help of CDC and PEPFAR, which are based also in Mozambique and embedded in the USAID offices in Maputo. In terms of investment, the US has made in recent years the largest investments in Africa are happening in Mozambique because Mozambique has become a global province of natural gas. So all oil majors, oil and gas companies from the United States are investing huge amounts of money into the natural gas sector. And on the sister city relationship, I'm happy to mention that we are partnering with Miami-Dade County to develop a sister city relationship. In December 2019, the mayor of Maputo City, our capital city, visited Miami, and we had a memorandum of understanding signed to develop this sister city relationship. Why Miami? Because it's a coastal city and it has a big port, big tourism, which Maputo seeks to develop as well. So we have developed this relationship. And fortunately for us, the mayor of Miami-Dade County is very much upbeat about this. But in the meantime, he ran for election to Congress and now he's a congressman. So I'm a very lucky ambassador who is going to have a congressman helping to promote this sister relationship with Miami-Dade County. That's Honorable Carlos Jimenez. Carlos. He happens to be Carlos as well. In Miami, we have also developed this partnership with the Florida International University, which is going to be part of this sister city relationship. Therefore, we think we have an excellent collaboration. You will appreciate that we do a lot more than this that I've given as examples of the work that we do here. But I thought by telling you a bit about this, we could generate a conversation that can start today, but continue in the future with your visits to the Embassy of Mozambique. We are centrally located at DuPont Circle, and you are invited. The invitation is given by the ambassador now to all of you to visit. And also by visiting Mozambique, we can chat more about the issues of concern. And I would stop there and thank you for your attention, and ready to hear if there are any questions, which we'll try to respond as much as we can in the time allocated.
Well, I want to start with saying that we really like that invitation. Wouldn't that be nice to have a Baruch alumni gathering at the embassy? And
Yeah.
even more so in Maputo.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be, those are some goals for us to work on. Thank you for the presentation. I have some questions to start off, but I want to invite everyone listening here to add their questions or comments to the chat, and or sort of raise your hand in the chat too, and we'll, if we may, unmute you so that you can speak and give your comments. But to start, to learn a little bit about Mozambique, we can start by asking you for a little explanation about the painting behind you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm glad you like the painting, because I always like to show it off. It's a painting by a Mozambican, one of the foremost painters in Mozambique. He's still alive and still painting, Noel Langa. And unfortunately, I cannot show you the other paintings in the house, but we do have others. These are my personal collection. And we like to promote culture. I spoke about cultural diplomacy. We like to promote culture, and I'm hoping that in the near future, we will be able to organize an exhibit of Mozambican art, which would show not only paintings, but also sculptures and books and things like that.
That would be nice. I'm sure that we would like to send that to you. I look forward to that. It's our post-COVID era. There are a lot of things to do. Like, what else can you tell us about the culture of Mozambique? The music, other issues of interest about Mozambique's culture.
Yes. Well, about Mozambique's culture, we usually say that we are a meeting point of civilizations. Why? Because the name Mozambique, which is the name in Portuguese, is Mozambique. It's supposed to be Musa Albik. It's relating to the Arab who was there, found by the Portuguese in Mozambique Island when they arrived in the Mozambique Island, which was the first capital of Mozambique. And there were Arabs there already. So the Portuguese, instead of saying the land of Musa Albik, they said the land of Mozambique, and it became the official name. So you would have some Arabs. There are not so many now, but we have some Europeans. The majority, of course, is African. We have some Europeans, and we have an Indian community, which is composed of Mozambicans, who some of them have never been to India, so they're Mozambican. And that mixture makes our diversity and culture very rich. in terms of experiences, cultural experiences, but also in terms of cuisine. The Mozambican cuisine is very well known in many places, including here. The Mozambican shrimp from the warm waters of the Indian Ocean is very well known and appreciated by those who have been to Mozambique. Seafood is huge, but our cuisine is a mixture of Portuguese and African cuisine, and it's a great mixture. In terms of cultural manifestation, you have very African manifestations of Bantu people who you find not only in Mozambique, but throughout Southern Africa. We have similar dances, cultural expressions with South Africa, Zimbabwe, and all the neighbors around. We speak some of the African languages are spoken in Mozambique, but also in the neighboring countries. So there's huge diversity, which Mozambique has managed to develop to unite the country as opposed to dividing people within the country. And we think that's a huge wealth for the country.
Sounds good. Sounds good. We have a question from Janet Rosbach, our Director of Alumni Relations. And of course, she is representing the education sector, the higher education sector, with her question.
Okay.
And that question is, what is the state of higher education in Mozambique in terms of universities and colleges? And do a lot of students come to the US or go to the UK or elsewhere for higher education, particularly for graduate degrees?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. Very important question. Yes, the higher education in Mozambique has grown considerably. At independence, we only had one university, and the university was not meant to teach Mozambicans, meaning Africans. It was meant for the Portuguese who lived there. So at independence, the university started with having people from African origin, I mean the blacks of the country. And it also branched out to the provinces, having branches. And then we started having more public institutions of higher education throughout the country, both public but also private. We also started having private universities. From one at independence, we now have about 40 high institutions of higher education and some higher level institutes. For a country is not very much, but if you are starting from such a low base, it's great. Now, in terms of students, we have students all over the world, but also here in the United States, students come for undergraduate degrees. They also manage to get Fulbright scholarships and other kinds of scholarships to do masters and PhDs. So you will find them around the United States. And myself, I discover almost every day that there's another Mozambican in that state that I thought there was no Mozambican. So it's really wonderful. And we are trying to bring them together in terms of communication and trying to get also them involved with Mozambique while they do their studies. And this is also combined with our interest in promoting relationship between institutions of higher learning from the US and Mozambique. And I mentioned FIU already, but we also have a program now which is just starting this year with Maryland University to train women engineers, young women engineers at master's level for very specific specialized training for oil and gas. This was an initiative by an American lady based in Houston that has a company that does recruiting in Mozambique for the oil and gas companies. And she established a foundation that she calls Doyen, to promote these girls to be doyens of engineering within Mozambique. But we are also looking for other partnerships. I have also made contact through one of my professors at Baruch, actually, Professor Joseph Onochi, who also visited Mozambique because of the relationship we developed during my time there. And we're trying to develop a relationship between the Zicklin School of Business and a business school in one of the public universities in Mozambique. But then we had changes of rectors in Mozambique, and then COVID came in. So the program has not developed, but I'm very keen to continue to promote that. So if we can talk more about this after this, I would really appreciate it.
And you mentioned oil and gas, and I just that's an important industry in Mozambique. And what about other important industries there? We saw the lovely video related to tourism. Can you tell us something about the economy now?
Yes. Well, the mainstay of the Mozambican economy is agriculture. Not because we have huge commercial agriculture, but because we have a lot of family-based agriculture. All families have a small farm in Mozambique, almost all families, those that live in the rural areas of the country. And this is being promoted. What we are trying to do now is to promote agribusiness, agro-industry, so that we can add value to the products that we produce in Mozambique. That is one very important area. And then we have the energy sector, which is now being complemented by the oil and gas sector, but we have been supplying energy not only to Mozambique, but to South Africa and other neighboring countries through the hydropower plant that we have in Mozambique, one of the largest in the country. It was until recently only second to the Aswan Dam in Egypt. So it was built to supply energy initially to South Africa only. Built in Mozambique by the Portuguese, but it was meant to supply energy to South Africa. After independence, of course, it started supplying energy to Mozambique and also the neighboring countries, and it continues to supply to South Africa. So energy is a very important sector in the country. The other sector is tourism. As you saw, we have this very long coastline, 1,500 miles of coastline with pristine beaches and huge potential for ecotourism and historic tourism, and all kinds of sports, aquatic sports. But in the hinterland, you have the parks that you saw some of them, where we have the big five, probably not all of them, but most of them, and other animals in those parks. Most of the country, there are huge extensions of land that have been reserved by the state to be conservation areas, and those are being developed.
Have a good time, John, when you were there. I bet you did.
Yeah.
Now we have another question from Laura. She said that she has heard about the seafood and she looks forward to trying it.
Yes.
So, but then she has a question for you. What aspect of being the ambassador has been most enjoyable? And what has been the most challenging part?
The most enjoyable has been to be able to mobilize development cooperation, that means aid to Mozambique, and being successful in getting regular flows of resources to assist the government in the development programs of the country. And I would also add that it has been enjoyable to meet people and develop people-to-people relationships. I have not done that yet here in the US, but in Germany, we had a Mozambique week in Germany, where we had about 60 people coming from Mozambique, the National Dance Company, people in the arts, writers, painters, sculptors, dancers, musicians. And for 1 week, they went from Berlin to Munich to Frankfurt, Bonn, and other places. And we showed what the Mozambican culture was. That was one of the beautiful moments of my work. The challenge is to work in missions. You may imagine that keeping an embassy, being a developing country and keeping an embassy and well-staffed is very costly. So we have a small team and we have to do the work that we need to do. So we have to double our effort, but it's a good challenge. We are sent here to do that work, so we do it with joy and with honor and privilege.
I hope we will have a chance to enjoy Mozambique week here someday.
Yes.
Oldest Sue, he says he seconds Laura's questions. And from Michael Blake, his comment is, China has been partnering with many African and Caribbean countries to aid their development. Has Mozambique sought out assistance from China?
Yes, indeed. The response is yes. Mozambique and China have had a relationship from way before independence. China was one of those countries that helped Mozambique to become independent. That's why I always tell my friends from here, the United States, from Germany, who would say you have to be careful with China because they want to colonize Africa. You have to be careful. I said, no, we know China and we know them well. We know they have their own interests, but we have ours. And they helped us to become independent. We are not about to let them colonize us. We have learned a big lesson from colonialism, and we will not anybody colonize us again. So it's about negotiating cooperation and collaboration. And we negotiate with the Chinese as we negotiate with the United States about our bilateral cooperation. They have their interests, we have ours. And that's how we work with them. And I must say that they have invested a lot in terms of foreign aid to build infrastructure in Mozambique. We today have the longest suspension bridge in Africa is in Maputo, linking Maputo to the other side of the bay over the port of Maputo, which will allow us to build something like a Brooklyn, from Manhattan to Brooklyn. We don't have the Brooklyn side, so we are trying to build something like Brooklyn. And that is a huge contribution to development, but they have invested in other areas of infrastructure. Now they are very strong on businesses. And we are talking about businesses that involve both US and Chinese interests in the same business, oil and gas. They too are making investments there. And they're collaborating with their American counterparts, European counterparts. So the Chinese are in Mozambique, and they've been there since independence.
Now from Namit Singh, an interesting question. Has the COVID-19 pandemic in Mozambique affected your work and priorities as a diplomat?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. It has affected our work because we have to work from home, we have to work virtually, and diplomacy is a game of contact, is interaction, is luncheons, dinners, receptions, where we meet people that we wouldn't otherwise meet. And working under these conditions is more difficult. But we understand the predicament we are in. It's global, and we work to find those global solutions to the problem that the Americans and all around the world are involved in. So what we have been doing is to cooperate with our partners here in the United States. We have gotten tremendous support from the US, including ventilators and PPEs and other forms of assistance. So it is also our priority to mobilize support for Mozambique. Because we are a developing country, we are not going to produce vaccines. We don't have enough resources to buy all the vaccines that we need, but we are benefiting from programs like COVAX that is supplying vaccines to developing countries through the World Bank and the WHO. So those are our priorities, but we continue to do virtual meetings with business people who show interest. This morning, I had a Zoom call with a company that is going to work in the energy sector in Mozambique, and they are going big. It's an investment of billions, and we're talking because they are going to Mozambique next week. So we try to continue to work even under conditions of COVID.
Well, we have a lot of interesting questions tonight. Here's one, and this gets back a little bit to the culture there and business. This question is from Cassie G, and she wants to know, did Nando's Peri Peri Chicken start out as a Mozambican restaurant or a South African one?
Well, what happens with Nando's is that it's not a Mozambican concern, but they use the recipe of the chicken peri peri, which is from Mozambique. And you will see in some of the places, at least the one that I go to once in a while on Connecticut Avenue, they have written there that their peri peri chicken is from Mozambique. So that's the connection. And they still go there. I met the people from Nando's from here in Maputo who were discussing continuing this business to make sure that the flavor of the chicken still has that Mozambican component into it. It was started there, but I think it started in South Africa. Most probably the person who started it lived in Mozambique, and he knew what he was starting, and it's a great business for him.
We have two more questions. This one from Namit Singh. How accessible is technology to the general population in Mozambique today? And are there efforts through diplomacy to make it more accessible?
Well, it is as accessible as it can be in a developing country. We diplomats try to promote more collaboration, international collaborations, to build up that technological capacity for Mozambique in all areas. But if you are talking about information technologies, that is going strong in Mozambique. All young people know how to deal with these. Many have studied abroad and went back, and some study in Mozambique, but they're very savvy about it. They've started small companies, startups in technologies, and they have been doing great. But when you go to other more complex technologies, we need to beef up that. We have a Ministry of Science and Technology that has been working on these. We have our universities that have been working on these. But I can tell you, my mother is illiterate. She cannot read. She learned to speak the official language, Portuguese, because of her grandchildren. They were going to school and they wanted to speak to her in Portuguese, so she learned Portuguese from them. But she knows how to use a mobile phone. And she wants the best of them. That's what she asked me to buy. So that is to tell you the story that information technologies are growing strong throughout the country, really. But we need more technology, and we are promoting those kinds of interactions.
Question from Joel D'Souza. Ambassador Carlos, thank you for being here. And his question is, what leads to a career in diplomacy? and
Sorry?
international affairs? What leads to what best would take someone into a career in diplomacy and international affairs? In terms of preparation, perhaps, what
Yes.
would be your advice for someone who is interested in this field?
Well, in Mozambique is the story that I told you about, and we have a high Institute for International Relations. If you're interested, then you go through that institute, but also if you are a lawyer, you studied law, then you do the entrance exams. But what would help is while you are a student or you have already studied, to gain interest in international affairs. When I was studying diplomacy, the first page in the newspaper in Mozambique that I would read was the fourth page because it was the international page. I wanted to be upbeat about what happens in the world. You have to have that kind of drive and interest in international issues. Today, you don't have to wait for a newspaper. You can just Google and Google everything about everything. So if you are interested in environment, to work on environment, you just go to check everything environment. And if you want to work on peace and security, just check everything United Nations, check everything about the European Union and other things that can help you to build your capacity to go to do an entrance exam at the State Department. And mind you, you don't have to do diplomacy only at the State Department. You can do it at the Department of Commerce. You can do it at USAID. You can do it at the White House. You can do it elsewhere in other agencies of government, and also in corporations, private corporations like ExxonMobil and others. They are working in Mozambique, for instance. They want to have specialists who can do diplomacy for them. Actually, one of their vice presidents that is in charge of Africa is a former assistant secretary for African affairs at the State Department that I interact with him very regularly here in Washington, DC. So you just need to build your capacity because unlike in Mozambique, where you may not have many people interested in diplomacy, here you have many, and you have many who have degrees that may be appropriate for diplomacy. And you can do that from international relations, but also if you are a lawyer, if you did international law and other areas. So you have to beef up your capacity to run and to be interviewed and to do well for a diplomacy a career in diplomacy.
Well, we have one more question that has been added, and following this question, then we'll close up with this, and then we'll go into breakout rooms to engage with each other, and so we can all kind of chat. And after that chat, we'll come back again. So the last question we have for you right now, Ambassador, is the United Nations still seen as a viable vehicle for international relations in Southern Africa and Mozambique? Or are other organizations such as the Clinton Foundation or Gates Foundation more impactful in the southern countries of Africa at this time?
Well, it's not a question of either or. It's a question of complementarity among these organizations. There's no other organization to substitute the United Nations. You really need it. Even the United States needs the United Nations. So that is an important universal organization where all countries meet and discuss global issues. If the UN was not there, we would have to reinvent it because we need to talk about basic things like regulating international flights. Is done by an agency based in Montreal, but it's a UN agency. WHO, we are dealing with the pandemic of HIV and AIDS. You cannot do this globally in a coordinated manner if you don't have an agency of the United Nations like WHO to deal with these things. Nuclear weapons, disarmament, all these issues, complex issues, can only be dealt with by an organization like the United Nations. And for countries like Mozambique and Southern African countries, this is the one place where we can voice our opinions, we can send our messages to the most powerful, to the most developed, and they have to listen to us. Why? Because our collective vote and our collective work turns us into a big force at the UN. And we want to use that force to promote the interests of developing nations, the interests of Africa, the interests of all countries of the world. And it works well. I think the UN remains essential. And I'm glad that the United States is giving indications that it wants to re-engage with the United Nations. I am personally happy to see Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield appointed to that job. She's a very good friend, personal friend, because she was our Assistant Secretary for African Affairs at the State Department in the Obama administration. And we worked very well with her. She is a great diplomat, and I think she's going to do a great job at the United Nations to bring the world together and do what needs to be done to deal with global problems that require global solutions.
And I didn't mention that question was from Janet Rosbach again. That was a good question. And I keep saying that we have the last question, but then there's so much interest that people are adding. So I'm going to give you this last one here, Alfred from Alfred Sanpien. And what is the nature of Mozambique's relations with its bordering nations? And that's a good question.
Yes, it is a wonderful question. Yes, thank you for that. Actually, it's for Mozambique. Mozambique's foreign policy, the neighboring countries are the most important. You don't choose your neighbors, you have to live with them. But it so happens that we have excellent relations and we develop them within the context of the Southern African Development Community, which brings all the countries of the region together every year. And they have meetings at head of state level, ministers of foreign affairs, and sectoral ministers every year, meaning ministers of trade meet in their own meeting, and ministers of industry and other line ministers, and they coordinate action. They design protocols for free trade around the region, free movement of goods and people around the region. And this is happening in Southern Africa. So for us in foreign policy, that is essential. That's why I mentioned in my initial remarks that we have the SADC group of ambassadors here, of which I'm a chairman now. We meet regularly. And I said we meet once a month, but we actually interact on a regular basis. And we have a WhatsApp group, for instance. We exchange messages, we exchange views, we call each other, and we talk regularly because it's important, not just for us as persons or people, but in terms of better serving our countries. When we coordinate action, when we exchange views about what we know, we add something, we complement each other. And it has been wonderful to work with colleagues in the region. And I know that in Southern Africa also, we work well with our neighboring countries.
Well, thank you. So that's the end of our questions, but to thank you very much for this and to thank everyone who has participated and asked these questions, these great questions. And it just shows that, this is an opportunity for us to gather, to learn from each other, in our Baruch alumni pursuit of continuous learning and experience. And also in the time of COVID, we can't yet travel to Mozambique, but we're getting to have a feel for it already and look forward to the opportunity to do that. And I have a message here from Becky, the chapter president, and she's reminding everyone to keep in touch with the DC Baruch chapter at gmail.com. So you can always send messages and suggestions there. So one of the things that we do hope to hear from you are your suggestions for future speakers. I know that many of you, and Kevin is thanking us, many of you have careers or experiences that may be very interesting to other members of the Baruch alumni chapter in this area, the DC area, DC, Northern Virginia, Maryland. So consider that. Please make recommendations for speakers. But now we want to do a little fellowship. So Neftali is going to break us into breakout rooms. And again, obrigada. Thank you very much, Carlos.
Thank you.
We're going into breakout.
Okay, I will do the breakout rooms. Carlos, thank you again for your expertise and your time. I am excited about the partnership with Miami-Dade, as I am a native of Miami-Dade County. So I look forward to the expansion that will take place. I will break out everybody in the room. It's already set up. You will be in there with one of the volunteers from the DC chapter, and have a great conversation, and we'll come back in about probably 10 minutes.
Becky, you're on mute. Well, Becky, you can unmute. He's talking away. Well,
I don't know. Yeah, it's a mute button. Okay. I had Laura, John Stoddard, Laura Jack, John Stoddard, and Amit Singh in our group. And basically they, gave the class, but they said virtual is good. I think we should keep this virtual at least once. When we ever get back to our new normal, that we still have virtual. People still like that. In fact, Laura was from Middle New York. I'm not sure how she, she's a Baruch alumni, but she's from Middle New York, and she said, I'm glad that I was able to attend. So I think we should definitely, probably should look at the calendar events. Maybe she did it that way or something. But,
she used to live in DC and then moved away.
Right. So yeah, that's right. So, but she's glad that she was able to attend. So we need to keep that in place. So that's everybody was just happy with what we're doing and want to hear more. Basically, any other news from anybody?
Mr. Ambassador, I invited them all to your embassy. I told them you would love to see them when the world gets back.
Yes, absolutely. In our group, we were talking about that, and I was saying, yes, I was not joking when I was inviting people to come to the embassy. And once COVID allows, that
we're gonna have a field trip. We're gonna do a field trip.
Yeah, we can do that. No problem at all. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we were looking. Yeah, that's right. We're gonna have a field trip. We've been looking for things to do and places to go together. That might be nice.
Yes.
Good to see some familiar faces. If Yvette, you have anything else to share?
First, I'll ask Abe. Anything from your group?
Well, our group was interesting. We have Vivian from Hong Kong. We have Joel from Haiti. We had Carlos from Mozambique. And we're the native Brooklyn people. And we also talked about Peace Corps. My son is in Peace Corps, and Carlos told us there's a big Peace Corps contingent doing great work in Mozambique, which is good to hear. I think
people want to know about starting sister.
Yeah, people.
Yeah.
Joel wanted to know about setting up a sister city relationship with Port-au-Prince in Haiti and Brooklyn. And beyond that, people have asked for Carlos's contact information. So I guess we could send that to whoever wants it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Carlos, would you be able to put your information in the chat if it's okay with you, if you'd like people to have it?
Oh, you want me to put it now?
So everybody can just have it all at once and they just...
Sure. I can do that. I'll just put my mobile number and then the rest can be given later.
Okay.
Also connect with Carlos on LinkedIn, how I've connected to many of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the group I was in, I was there with Michael Blake and Alfred Sunkian and Janet Rosbach and Kathy G. So, we had a good discussion. We were glad to get together and for me to meet Michael and Alfred that I hadn't met before. But Michael said he used to go to Baruch events, but he hasn't been seeing notices for the holiday parties, for example, that we've had. So we have to make sure that we get Michael and Alfred on that distribution. So that we'll continue to see them at events. Yeah, so I think it was good. People are, so that just shows the interest in being able to network.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure. Yeah, we'll talk with New York to see, if they can make sure they're on the list. Michael and who else was the person? Michael and
Alfred.
Alfred,
I
yes.
guess you both got the notices to this event, right? So, but you received Alfred, Michael, you received this notice by email this time? Michael, you're in mute.
Yes, I got it by email.
Okay.
It's possible, and it's actually, I got it on an email account that I hardly ever use, and that could be part of the problem. I may need to update my email information with the school.
Okay.
Michael, if you'd like, I could put in the email address that you could use to email us and let us, so we can update your information.
Okay, that's great.
Same for you, Alfred.
And Janet mentioned also how like psychology or engagement, I think it was, Janet said. And people like a personal kind of invite to do something. So we should think about that too. And all of you who are here, you may still be in contact with other graduates, other alumni from Baruch. So it'd be helpful if when you see an announcement, perhaps to reach out to them, because they may be having the same trouble. They may not be on the mailing list. They may not have updated their email addresses.
Yes, I've just added my email as well, my mobile number and my email address. And Nefti, we have to talk about Miami-Dade.
Certainly. Certainly.
Yes.
I still have some connections there. I have family still lives there, so.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Becky, Yvette, Abe?
We're good.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for all attending. Thank you, New York, for your support. Without you, we wouldn't have been able to do this. So thank you, so that, the technology and just your support with helping us get through everything. So setting up the video, we, practice that to get it going, and Carlos setting that up. And so they're just there. So thank you, New York.